Welcome to the Mycelium Network Podcast, a podcast all about early stage web developers and the mentors and teachers that help them along the way. Hey Ryan, welcome to the
Scott.
Mycelium Network Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to join you, Skulk.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. We haven't talked in way too long.
I know, way too long.
Yeah. So I know you from Mozilla, and for a long time we worked together on the MD and Web Docs project. And then you had a short period of time where you explored some other avenues, which we'll talk about a bit later. And then you came back to the fold and joined the Mozillian family again. But I think since you rejoined, both of us have been heads down on a bunch of things, and we're never really got a chance to connect again. So I thought, what better way to reconnect than record a bloody podcast? So I invited you, and I was so happy when you said you are into it. So I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. It's an honor, Skulk.
So to get us started, I've sat in many meetings where we've introduced ourselves, where we were both in the room, and we've introduced ourselves to other people, and we've shared some of our life's journey to people. And so therefore, I know you have a really interesting story to tell. So I'm going to keep quiet and start wherever you feel like, and just tell us, who is Ryan Johnson, where you come from, and how did you get to today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's especially fun talking to you about it because, I know of your background, in music and really accomplished in music. And I always thought that was just so cool that you've got that artistic, cultural background, and then you bring that to technology. Because I can relate to that somewhat. Yeah, I started off in technology. I kind of, I always tell people that the reason I got into technology was because I could have gone, I was very interested in humanities, writing and art and all that stuff. But I think technology attracted me initially when I was young, and a teenager was just was because of the chance to make good money. I came from a kind of a poor family, and so that was one aspect. But also, I think in a sense that's kind of a external thing, really. But from an internal point of view, I thought it was a chance to kind of create some things. I guess I was always attracted to engineering from the kind of the creative aspect of it. And then also, I remember being really attracted to computers, really from the point of view of, I had heard about artificial intelligence way back then. And that intrigued me. How is it that, computers think? What? What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I was always intrigued by that. And I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of it. So there was a philosophical aspect to it as well. And I think that's probably maybe the biggest core of who I am is I'm more attracted to philosophy and psychology and things like that. But technology kind of was my way to make a living and kind of, get myself. We weren't in poverty, but we just didn't have money as a family. So I went into electrical engineering and it was specifically what I kind of focused on. I was never really into, voltage and current and all that kind of stuff. But what I was really interested in was computers. And again, because of this angle of what is a computer and how does it what makes it tick, and so I focused on computer hardware, but we did computer hardware and software in college, and I thought I was really fascinated by it, and I enjoyed especially the digital systems point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in my sophomore year of college, kind of the light bulb came on, how hardware works, and that was kind of cool. So anyway, so the college was electrical engineering, really a focus on computer hardware and software, mostly computer hardware. And I got out of college and I just wanted to do computer hardware. And I started working for a company called Zycad. They were a little startup in Minnesota. And I don't know if you remember, there was a big computer company in Minnesota called Control Data, and they made these large mainframes. And a few of the engineers from Control Data had started this company called Zycad, and they were making this basically this supercomputer, and wow. And I thought it was really kind of a cool It was very small at the time, and I joined when it was very small. So anyway, so that was fun. It was interesting, and I learned a lot about hardware systems and designing hardware systems. But I also kind of began to realize that the only people that really get to do the creative work in hardware systems are just kind of at the top of the pyramid. And that started my transition, basically. Then I did that for a while. And then I think another, source of discontent was I was feeling like I spent so much time studying tech, and I didn't really get to explore the humanities side of my personality. So I said, I'm going to start working in, what we called within the hardware realm, we called it applications engineering, which is you kind of work with the customers more. Okay. It's very technical, but you work more with people. So I did that for a while. And then eventually I just thought, I don't know if I'm kind of sick of tech. And so I started studying this will be crazy, but I started studying jazz guitar at the time, and just thinking, I'm just going to quit my job and study jazz guitar and just figure out, what to do next after that. Yeah, and so I did. I quit my job, and then crazy enough, I it's a long story, so I won't go into it, but I got, I landed at this Benedictine monastery out on the West Coast, and just as a guest. They had this kind of thing where you could just go there as a guest and live there and work there for a year. So I did that, and that was really that was just fun. It was a great time to just I just became basically a farmhand. I milk cows. I and just read books and thought and stuff like that. So it was really great,
fascinating.
And so then, after a year of that, I was like, I want to get back to life. And so I thought, I'm going to go into psychology. So then I went and got my master's degree in counseling psychology. And I just kind of had thought, I'm done with tech. I'm and it felt good, actually. I was like, it felt more who I was. And I remember I finished my master's degree and working as a psychologist, a therapist. It's kind of hard to make a living. So I was faced with like, well, how do I get a job? How do I make money? And some friends who were living in San Diego had started this little software company called Cabinet Solutions. Basically software for people who design cabinets, kitchen cabinets. And they were just tiny, barely making a living, living not near the beach in Carlsbad in San Diego. And they're like, hey, come on out to California and work with us, while you figure out what you want to do. So I did. I just went out there, and it was kind of a shock at first, actually, because I'd given up on. I hadn't, followed tech or done anything in tech. So I started programming in C, C++. And it was really rough at the first. And I remember just like, I started working with them, and then I thought, I can't do this. But they talked me into it, so I kept going. Anyway, it's sort of fast forwarding more is that I kind of just got pulled into software, and which I liked because I thought software is like this space where, everyone can be more creative. And I think especially in the world that we're in, that even better than I do, Skulk, is the open source world we're in, where everybody's creating these really high quality packages of software. And for me, I know the Python world the best, but also the JavaScript world, of course. But it's pretty amazing, the industry really depends on these really high quality open source packages.
Yeah, the world runs on open source.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So it's like, I thought that was really cool, and I still think that's really amazing, that I feel like the software space is so much more creative, and I was slow to realize that, having been initially attracted to the hardware side. But yeah, I was, my journey from there was, I think my first, I was working for a company called Boston Scientific. But when I joined, they were called Guidant. They were in Minnesota, and they were a medical device, pacemaker, defibrillator manufacturer. And, that was really a cool place to work too, because, it was just this new realm of, medical related and hardware, software. And I was doing kind of software related stuff I was working with software that was kind of related to the hardware, the quality of the hardware. And, and it was there that I really discovered Python through a friend. And again, I was starting to kind of get tired of technology. And, I think that's one of the main themes of my tech path is just Python. I just fell in love with it. I just loved the language. I loved the ecosystem. I remember, Django was just coming out, the web framework. And, I remember taking a class in Django way back then. I remember it was like, one of the very earliest Django versions. And that just got me hooked. And I just, remember just telling my wife, like, I'm done. I'm only going to take jobs that are related to Python from now on. And so then I got this job at, Seagate, again, kind of related. They were trying to make, non-volatile memory, but as dense, but much denser. And it was a research project. And I came on as sort of, working with Python to help them with their testing and things like that. Wow. So I did that for a while. Seagate eventually closed that. And then the real big break for me was, I saw an opening at Lucasfilm in the Bay Area. And I just, oh man, that's, that would just be a dream job. And it seemed so perfect too, because they were really a heavy Python shop. So I applied and was, pleasantly surprised that I got, an interview. And I still remember it, just all the details of flying out there. The Lucasfilm, they have several campuses, but the main campus is right in the Presidio. It's freaking gorgeous. It's amazing. Yeah. And I remember flying out there and, it was just fabulous. And I hit it off with the team. So I got the job and went out there, and that really shaped me, I think, more than anything other than Mozilla, just because the team there was fantastic. And my manager there, Lori Giannino, who's still there, a lot of this team, the team that I worked with, a lot of that team is still there. They were just fabulous. Lori is just probably, one of the best managers definitely one of the best managers I've ever worked with. Jeff Odell was a manager there. Just great people, great technology, fun space, because we basically built Python software to help manage the movie production process. And so I worked my time there. I worked with Industrial Light and Magic. So I got to meet some, fascinating people, that are kind of semi-famous in the movie industry, visual effects supervisors. And it was fabulous. And the team it was like one of those cases where I just felt like I fell into, actually fell into something that was, really great. Great team, great people, great organization, fascinating work. But of course, the downside, the plus side and the downside it was in the Bay Area. Because the plus side is I love the Bay Area. I love the weather, the location, the city. The downside is it's so, expensive that it's so hard to kind of plant roots there. But anyway, and then from there, basically had to leave Lucasfilm just for the reasons of trying to, buy a house. So I left Lucasfilm and went to work. One of my friends at Lucasfilm went to work for a biotech company called Twist Bioscience. They're building synthetic DNA for biotech research. So I went to work for them for about 6 months, and that I love to get into some of that because that's another theme I wanted to talk to you about, Skulk. Anyway, I left Twist Bioscience and came to Portland, Oregon, and eventually landed at Mozilla. And to me, the two great places I've been at are Lucasfilm, Mozilla, and like you said, I had my early stint at Mozilla where you and I worked together on MDN WebDocs, and then went off and worked for about 6 months at a quantum computing place called PsyQuantum, which was fascinating. And then now I'm back at Mozilla, and I'm so grateful to be back because Mozilla is such a special place. As you and I know, it's there's a lot of special people here that really care about the web and ethics and what's good for humanity in terms of technology. So anyway, I jumped all over the place, but I think another thing I wanted to touch on with you was I think one of the themes throughout my whole career that's kind of driven what I do is just trying to find, I guess, a context in which to work in technology that feels humane, like where the ends are humane and the way we work together as a team is humane. And that's been such a, I'd love to talk to you about that because I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges, I think. I think one of the questions you had kind of laid out that we could talk about was just like, what are the challenges in tech? And I feel like that's to me one of the biggest, apart from the larger challenges of, all the ethical dilemmas of big tech and social media and AI and all, kind of the bubbles, the kind of the worldview bubbles that you get into in social media and that kind of stuff, which everybody, has been well documented and everybody, hopefully knows about that because those are huge, I think world destabilizing kind of issues. But apart from that, I feel like one of the biggest challenges is just, I think, I don't think in technology we've found a way to work together, we're building technology, but it's a social endeavor, you have to get a team together. Technology is so complex that you have to build teams, and teams are groups of people. And I feel like we don't yet in tech have a good feeling for, or I don't know, how would you say this, Skulk? But I feel like we don't have a good appreciation for that, how important that is. And I think that's one of the things I love so much about Lucasfilm and my manager, Lori Janino, and my managers there, Lori Janino and Jeff Odell, is that I feel like they were just very people-centered. Like Lori just felt like, I'm going to build the team. The team is the most important thing, and the technology will come out of it,
Yeah.
And the technology will follow. And it's so rare. And I think that's something I've always been thinking about and chasing,
Yeah. No, for sure. I think one of the things that might have been contributing to this is, I don't know when exactly it started, but at some point, I think it might have been in the initial .com bubble and burst, and then it followed on from there. It's this idea that you don't spend more than 2 years at a company. Like, if you're longer at a company for 2 years, people start questioning, like, what the heck? Why are you still... And I think because of that, you can never really build a culture, because just as the culture starts forming, a bunch of people leave and new people enter. And
totally agree.
I think so it's good to have movement, but I think there's too much churn. And so I think people get into it for the wrong reasons. But I think that is why places like Lucasfilm, Mozilla, and hopefully what I can create with the company I'm building is somewhere where there's variety and where you are encouraged to come up with ideas, explore them, fail, and it's okay. I think in a lot of companies, while they say failure is good and the more you fail, the more you learn, oftentimes you'll find that it's not really true. If you do try something that doesn't work, it's rare that they're going to celebrate that failure. There's going to be a heck of a lot of questions that's going to follow that failure. And if you can't justify it, you're more often than not going to be out of a job. So, well said. I think that's the problem is, like, companies are just, and I think a lot of people just do it because for the money. And I think that's also incorrect. And I think it's got a lot to do with marketing around tech, where there's a narrative being spun that it's a way to get rich. Get a job in tech and just 1, 2, 3 years and you're going to be a millionaire and you can like quit and go sail a boat for the rest of your life. And sure, that happens to some folks, but those are not the rule. Those are the outliers by a big thing. And I think people keep chasing that, and that's why they keep leaving and leaving and leaving, because they're chasing something that, and I don't think that you should do it for that. I think we should, like you said, have humane ends and the means should be humane, so that we're building culture, we're building a group of people that believe in the product that we're building or the products that we're building. And I think open source maybe has more of this than working at a specific company. Some you're lucky to experience that, like Mozilla. Maybe that's why Mozilla has this theme, because it's largely open source. Because there's this dude, Ron Lanier, that he's now, I believe, still at Microsoft Research. And he made the point that one of the most successful social networks is GitHub. They've somehow got it right. And his thought around it is it's because there's a sense of ownership and there's this sense of co-creation and there's a creativity there. So while on social media you send a tweet and it's ephemeral, it just goes into the void and maybe nobody sees it. Here you're creating something together that is having direct impact, like MDN, for example. We're all building it with this big community of contributors, and it has a good feeling about it, because we've heard so many times how people have told us how it's had an impact on their life. Like, I was able to contribute and through that I got a job, or I was able to learn because MDN's for free and now I was able to lift myself out of poverty. So, and I think when you hear things like that and you work together as a group for long enough, it starts building a relationship with everybody And then it's really hard to leave. I think everybody that's left the team in the last year or two, it was not easy.
Beautifully said, Skulk. You should be the subject of this podcast, Skulk. I loved everything you said. It was beautifully said, and you're absolutely right. I think you touched on one of the key things is just nobody stays, any place long enough. And the two exceptions in my career have been Lucasfilm and Mozilla, where Lucasfilm, that same group, like Lori is very protective of her group, and they've been together for 10, 15 years now, and largely the same group is still there, and they really, like you said, Skulk, it's all like you want to work in a community where you feel accepted. Everybody wants to be accepted in a community,
of course,
and then create something together, and so I loved everything you said. I could just sit back and listen to you go on because I think that's so important. It's so, and I think that's missing. I feel like that's. You said it so well. I feel like some open source projects have better communities than any companies do.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, if I take a common month, because in this year I basically changed careers from a front-end engineer to a community manager, and I mean, if I take the number of times that we've had somebody that's been not even necessarily toxic, but just disruptive as part of this massive open source project, one of the, in the top 20 open source projects on GitHub, it's been like, I can count it on a single hand. And if you compare and contrast that with stuff you hear that happens inside companies, the way women are treated, the way people who are non-binary, people who, and then also crazy things like people who have neurodiversity, who are being treated really unfairly. And they have so much to contribute if you play to their strengths. But oftentimes our world and the companies that run the world are not set up for these people. And then you lose that sense of, you feel as an outsider. And then it's hard to find, everything becomes harder. Because I heard the other day, I spoke to Jennifer Riggins on a different podcast, and she mentioned that they did some research, and if you blinded people doing reviews, so you don't know the gender or anything about this pull request that you're reviewing,
right,
more pull requests of women are accepted than men. But if you take the blinders off, the opposite happens. Because there's also this weird thing with a female will not apply for a job unless she feels she meets 100% of the job description criteria, whereas the average man will apply if he meets only 65% of the criteria, which is crazy because we all know job descriptions are bogus. I mean, if you can literally fulfill everything they ask for, you're a superhuman.
You're a superhuman, exactly.
Because honestly, like I can't believe. I think those are what, like as we mentioned previously, like some of the challenges in tech. I think that is still one of the biggest challenges is the interview process and how jobs are being. The job descriptions that people use are just unreasonable, and it makes it super hard for people getting into tech. So it doesn't necessarily mean people are like in their early 20s. This could be somebody in their 40s that has been doing whatever for their whole life and just decided, I want to do something else, and I decide to get into tech. That is one of the hardest things, is they look at this world and they're like, where am I going to find my place? All these people want 3, 4, 5 years experience, and they want me to have experience and databases and all these things. I did a boot camp. I have some basic knowledge and I can contribute to something. But so you feel like you're running in molasses, as they say.
Yes.
And the other crazy thing about and hopefully this won't last too long, but because of this insane layoffs that's happened in the last 6 months almost, there's this weird counterbalance that's happened in the tech industry where there are thousands of highly skilled people on the job market now. And so all these new folks that got into engineering with promises of wealth and success now have to compete with these people for positions. And so it's making their lives really, really tough. And like me, I see that because I run this community, and there's quite a number of people there that's exactly at this point where they're entering this market from as young folks or as people that was a lawyer for the last 10 years or, whatever. And they're scared that they might have made a mistake because they're looking at this situation and they're like, I'm not so sure if I'm going to get a job. So, you have to be, and it is tough. I don't lie to these people. I told them it is tough, but don't give up because there are companies out there that value the person over just the medial labor of writing code every day, that will take you in, that will give you an opportunity and allow you to grow inside the company, because that's what you want, right? You want to take that person that's enthusiastic in and give them place to grow, because you're as the company, you're gonna reap the benefits of that big time.
Yeah, wholeheartily agree, Skulk. I feel like what's missing, one of the biggest, kind of riff off what you've been saying, which I loved everything you said, is that I feel like one of the biggest challenges that I would love to, be a part of the solution is, one of the biggest challenges we have is to create, I think you touched on it, like so many, almost all of tech is focused on just, money, basically, profit. And I feel like we need a different model where obviously, you have to make a living. We all have to make a living, So, there is that side where you have to bring in income, but I feel like the focus should be more on, building a community, an organization that's a community of people that really care about each other as people. And we also realize we have to make a living, and we can use each other's talents and gifts, as a community to make a living together, and use tech, and tech is just sort of a way to do that. And then, I feel like that's so necessary. We need a new model, or I think we need new, experiments, I guess, to find new models where this would work. Mozilla is kind of one of those where, it's not perfect, but it's different. It's different enough where I think there really is some sense of community there. Obviously, there, I've seen the dark side too, but in the Bay Area, there's just, it's just too much driven by money. It's just pure money. And I was shocked at how cold-hearted that is. Like you said, there is no sense of community. There is no sense of like, we're doing this for each other and for our customers, And I feel like that's missing sometimes. It's all about how do we achieve money rather than let's build something that's of value to our customers and of value to ourselves as a community that's making this, And it's almost like we need, organizations that are more like small craft oriented, or, places that are doing this out of the love of providing something for somebody, and also a love of like doing something together and creating something together and supporting each other. And obviously, what's sad is that often you talk about this, and people roll their eyes and, oh yeah, the business world is cold and, that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
But it will fly. People do create excellent small companies, whether it's bakeries or whatever. And they do create successful organizations because they do focus on, hey, let's serve our customers something really good, something quality. But let's also care for each other in that process. Like you and I were talking about, the end is good and the means is good, in terms of getting there. And I feel like that's so hard to find. It's too hard to find in our industry. I think that's the biggest thing that young people face. Oh, one more thing I wanted to, sorry, my brain is firing from all this stuff.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Too. But one of the things that's been inspiring me lately is I like jazz, and I love in the jazz community, there's a sense of, I think the jazz community has such a healthy, there's something really healthy about it, more than I've seen in other places, where the elders of the jazz community, the greats, they feel this responsibility to bring in the young, the people that are entering jazz and to kind of take them under the wing and then the young also feel like, they need to respect the tradition, the Coltrane's or whatever, the Miles Davis and, they need to kind of absorb what they've done and respect them. But what's interesting is that the elders of the jazz community want them to, hey, you got to absorb where we've been, but you don't absorb it to copy us. You absorb it to take it where you want to go,
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought that was just so beautiful, like that balance between creating something new and respecting the tradition. And I feel like a lot of that applies to any organization or, in tech, which is a creative industry. Yeah, you've got to kind of absorb the tradition. You got to look at, for example, in the Python world, hey, how did Django build this framework? And how did they go about doing this? How did Django folks do this? And then look at the code, look at the way they organize themselves, look at the community they've built, and then digest that, and then say, how can we make this even better? Where can we take it from there? I think that's just so cool about jazz. And I feel like that's not, it's not really there in the tech community. There isn't this sense of like...
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? I mean, because I totally get what you're saying. And I think a lot of the craft industries are getting it right. And here it's like, insert whatever product, like craft coffee, craft bakeries, craft beer, craft teas, all these things. I think what I've seen in a lot of these places when I look at the way they share what they've accomplished, they always celebrate each and every person that's there. And I think being smaller net helps there. Like there's a point where you get too big, which is something that I'm very, very conscious of, is I think there's some point where you have to ask yourself the question of how much is enough, because I think some people have forgotten to ask that question. And there's some people in this world that have more than is really fair. So you have to ask yourself the question of when do I have enough? Because there is a saturation point for all of us, and it might differ from one person to the other, but I think it kind of tops out at a certain point. And then how big is big enough if you're creating a company? And I think there it also differs, but I think there's also, again, there's saturation point. I think as soon as you lose touch with the people, you're getting too big. As soon as the people aspect starts getting lost in process and I don't know, policy, you probably should start looking at the bigger picture and ask, are we getting too big? Should we slow down? And most likely the answer is going to be yes. Because the other big thing that I see in those like things is the sense of community. And what do you want in a community? You want everybody to succeed. There's no community formed around the idea that I want to push you down so that I can be on top. That is not what a community is about. When you're in a community, you want to lift everybody up. So if somebody in the community is struggling, you're going to say, how can we help? So you will naturally, it's almost crazy that we're not doing it this way, because it seems to me it's a better recipe for success than focusing on material wealth. Because there you quickly get to the dog-eat-dog world.
I love that.
I think you get to the dog-eat-dog world very quickly, and then it gets toxic. Whereas if you're in this community thing, everybody is there to make sure that everybody succeeds, and whatever success means for you. But it's important that you understand what success means to somebody else so that you can support them in that journey. And they will naturally do it back, because that's how karma works. That's how we as human beings work. You know, if I feel that you have my best in your head, then I will do the same for you. But if I feel attacked by you, then I might naturally attack back, because our little lizard brain will kick in and say, danger, we need to either run or we need to fight back.
Yes.
And I think you know that well, having studied psychology. So that is actually quite an interesting inflection point there. Like, how does that knowledge you gained studying counseling psychology, like, do you find it useful that you know that in the tech world? Does it help you deal with some things?
I mean, I think you've already touched on a lot of it, Skalk. You said it so beautifully, really, is I think, technology is, I think people, technology is the people in tech are too focused on the tech, and they're not focused enough on the community, they're not focused enough on that we can't do we can't build anything of value unless we do it together, with a community of people. And it's too often focused on like, who's the best, who's the best? They get all the spoils and who, it isn't like, hey, we did this together. It's just like, like Tesla is Elon Musk. No, it's not Elon Musk. It's like a whole group of people creating something,
sure.
And
It's,
I feel like that's what psychology, is the study of that is helped in the sense of you see the complexity of doing something together as a community of people. And, people have different motivations. They have different, interests and different talents. And that is, to me, so fascinating. It's just, during that stint when I was managing the engineering team at MDN Webbox, I loved it from that point of view. Just like, I would love to be, I think management interests me just from that point of view. Like, how do you build a community and have people feel like they're doing what they want to do and contributing in a way that, appeals to their strengths. So I think that's the side of psychology that's really, I think that's really fits in the tech world. And I feel like we need more of that, we need more engineers, people who are interested in tech, who bring that focus of, caring about not just the tech, but like how we work together. And we've touched upon all that. And again, it goes back to your point, Skalk, and I'm so glad you're like a community manager now on MDN, because, I've always felt that from you. You always have had that strong sense of like, hey, we got to do this as a community. The community matters. But when the bottom line is quarterly profits, the community doesn't matter, obviously look at the way Musk has treated Twitter. It's just like, the community doesn't matter at all. All that matters
is brutal. Yeah.
Tech and working hard and, feeding the beast of quarterly profits. And, that just, we can't survive as a, humanity can't survive if that's the model of organizations. It's crazy. Like, organizations are part of a larger thing called society, and countries and the way we organize ourselves as corporations, it matters a lot. It matters a lot for society, and people have to work in these kind of cold machines called corporations, and I think a lot of the big tech companies are kind of colder, than, some are less cold than others, but, they're pretty impersonal and can be pretty cold. And I think we need more of these smaller communities where there's more warmth, and more supporting each other while you're trying to make, you need that dual focus. You gotta get a group of people together that really care about making something of value for others. I think that should be the focus. Like, hey, let's create something of real value for others and take joy in that. And then also take joy in, we're going to do that and make a living at the same time. The goal isn't to get rich. The goal is to put food on the table, support our families, enjoy life, participate in society and then also create something of value for others. And I feel like that's, I think we need more of, we need that in the tech world. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's easy to, easy kind of to put our finger on it. But I feel like, you've already said this better than I did, Skulk, but I feel like that, it's too focused right now on money, and people get into it for the wrong reason of getting rich,
Yeah.
And it should be more on like, hey, how can I support myself, support my colleagues, and do good things for the customer,
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a much healthier approach. And I think maybe we're at a point where the time is right to experiment, like you said. Experiment with some new ideas, new ways of working, That's why I always like to, when I refer to the people that use MDN, I like to refer to them as readers as opposed to users. Because I think language matters, right? The language we use often changes how we think of something. So if you call somebody a user, you might think of their needs differently than you might if they're a reader or a learner. So I think language matters. And I think, to some extent,
that's really well said.
We've kind of done some of that at Mozilla, but then it slips again. So we have to constantly remind ourselves that what we call the people that use our products, benefit from our products, we need to think about the language we use, because it's going to mentally flip switches. That's going to make you think about the thing. And I think then it's also important to see, I think that's what's kind of nice about Mozilla, is this whole Mozillians thing. Once a Mozillian, always a Mozillian.
Yeah.
I think that extends that is what I'm talking about, the language that makes it feel more like it's not just a company. It's a bit more than that. But yeah, it's tough because sometimes the family's not that healthy, and then, some things happen that's not also not healthy for the family. But it's interesting.
I know we're running low on time, Skulp, but just one more thing, the thought that occurred to me, and it related. Yeah. I think it's maybe a good thing to end on, or a good topic to end on, is I feel like, with technology, becoming more powerful, like, artificial intelligence is incredible what that can do now. And the power of that to solve problems is incredible. And, dabbling in quantum computing, working for that, PsyQuantum for a bit, I see what's coming there. And that's incredible. Like that, the power, once, a quantum computer is built that's usable, that can solve real problems. And one of the biggest focuses there is really chemistry. At PsyQuantum, the founders talk about, quantum computing will be able to basically solve chemistry problems that are just absolutely impossible to solve, and you can actually engineer materials, and that kind of thing. So there's a whole revolution coming in quantum computing. We're already in the middle of a revolution with artificial intelligence. Okay, that's all, we all can talk about that and see that coming. But I think everything that you and I have been talking about, the community aspect and the way we organize our organizations, the way we create communities, that is I think because of these developments in tech, that's even 100 times more important now. Like if we don't get that right, these powerful technologies of quantum computing and AI are going to be controlled by organizations that don't have a sense of community. All they do care about is getting rich and, enriching a few. And that is dangerous. Like, I think, I guess my point is that it's so imperative that I think humanity in the tech world solves this problem of how do we organize ourselves, and in terms of providing value to people and make a living in a way that supports the external community outside the organization as well as the internal community within the organization. I feel like if we don't do that as human beings, it's super dangerous. Like we've got, these amazing, powerful technologies coming down the road, and we don't have the organizational, I don't know how would you say this, Skulk, but we don't have that kind of sense of community and how we organize ourselves yet. That hasn't kept up with it, No,
it hasn't. It hasn't. Technology's run away with us. I totally agree. I think the big thing that is needed is ethics, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of things that's not happening is ethics. And I think if you build a healthy company with a sense of community and purpose, ethics comes built in.
Well said. Yeah.
But if those core things that you just said are missing, then ethics become like accessibility, where it's bolted on and it doesn't really feel sincere. So I think you are 100% correct that the technology is evolving at the speed of light, but we need to step back and look at what are we doing with it, and how are we treating each other in this process. Because a lot of the technologies we built are toxic to us as human beings and to our children and all of this. And it's simply because it's run away. Like we've lost touch with it, and it's kind of like evolved to a point where it's out of control. But all is not lost. I think the fact that me and you can have a conversation about this and be in agreement on this means there are more people that will also feel this way. And connecting all of those people will build up a momentum that can then drive a change. So, So thanks so much, Skulk. Ryan, for this lovely conversation.
Thank you, Skulk. I'm just energized after talking to you. I'm serious. I could just go on for like 2 more hours.
No, for sure. Yeah. I was about to say that. It's so fun
talking to you about this.
So we'll definitely do this again, whether it's on a podcast or just because. Thanks so much, and have a lovely rest of your day, and all of the very, very best.
Thanks so much, Skulk. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mycelium Network Podcast. If you're not already, please subscribe, star, and leave a review for us in your podcatcher of choice. This helps others find us and helps us make a better podcast for you, our listeners. You can also find and follow us on Twitter @Network Mycelium and join the community on Discord. All the links are available in the show notes.